Hey, all you Arizona lovers. This is the Finding Arizona podcast, episode number 351. I'm your host, Jose. Thank you so much for watching us. As always, we are coming to you through two different ways. One is audio, and that's going to be all podcast formats, all podcast platforms. Just find us available at Finding Arizona Podcast. And the second form is actually going to be video format on our website and on our YouTube page. So if you want just the video, then you can go over to our YouTube page at youtube.com/Finding Arizona Podcast. And then on top of that, if you want to just go to our website has everything you could possibly imagine. But that being said, today is episode number 351 with Vanessa, who is a fellow podcaster. I encourage you guys to check out all of her links below. We always connect her stuff and everyone else's stuff to every episode so that you can go find them yourself. That being said, I encourage you guys to go over to our website, check out everyone who's over there, go check out their links, go and check out everything that they have to offer. But on top of that, go check out our newsletter, which is a little bit more the official side. If you just want to know who's coming into our doors, who's going to be coming up into next week and the following week, and then on top of that, you want promo codes, that's the place to be. But if you want a little bit more of the personal side, I get it. You want to get into the weeds and you want to understand why they do what they do or how is this happening? Well, that is going to be our blog. Our blog is a little bit more of the personal side of our life that considers our family, what we're into, and also what is going on in our community. All that is just to say we have a wonderful website. We have wonderful social media. That's Finding Arizona Podcast under everything. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I hope that you guys are connecting with us because we want to know who you want to come in next, because that is the best part about our communication with you. We get to understand who's in the community, who's coming out and being very vocal about what they do, who's the next big thing. That is why we do what we do. We are finders, and we hope that you guys will help us find the next best thing here in the Valley. That being said, let's just jump right into it. Episode number 351 with Vanessa. I will see you on the next episode. And as always, we end our intros with kisses, hugs, and belly rubs. I will see you next time. Welcome back, everybody, to the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose. As always, we bring in fantastic guests every week, and today's no different. I have a very wonderful speech that I want to just get this situated because I want to make sure that I say this right. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce Vanessa, who is an accomplished writer, podcaster. She has published 2 newsletters. One is called Meeting in the Middle, which includes her podcast. I hadn't considered that. And that's for everything navigating life, singlehood, and dating in the midlife. And then her other newsletter being Late to My Own Party, which is a free newsletter about late diagnosed ADHD. Welcome, Vanessa. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to say that there's a lot of things that we're going to discuss today. But again, just one of the greatest things that I could just say is when we have 2 podcasters on 2 individual podcasters, I have no doubt it's going to be a fun conversation. So let's just get started. And I'll just ask you the question that we ask everyone is just give us your origin story. How does writing and podcasting come into your life and your world? And how did this all come to be?
Well, thanks so much for asking. So, I have always been a creative person. And so, growing up, I had such a love for words. I was an avid reader, and I think that I wrote my first short story when I was in the 3rd grade, and I put it on index cards and
Nice.
gave it to my 3rd grade teacher. And I have no idea what it was about, but it was apparently hilarious because she called up my parents and were like, I can't believe what your child just did. And that sort of sparked this love for me. But I have gone through periods of my life where I have been really in tune with that or completely disconnected from it. So
Yeah.
I went to college and I majored in English and I did a lot of creative writing in college and I loved it so much. And it was so much of who I was.
Mhm.
And then I graduated from college. I became a high school English teacher and was so immersed into that world of words.
Yeah.
But teaching is hard. And I kind of got to the point where I was frustrated, left that behind, and went into a corporate world. And
Okay.
so I kind of talk about like I sort of othered. I became this other person where I
Hmm.
became sort of this corporate person. I became a wife. I became a mother. And this creative side of me was just put on a back burner because it didn't seem like it was a reasonable pursuit. I had all
Yeah.
of these things that were just so linear and concrete that needed my attention.
Hmm.
And then I went through my first divorce. I'm twice divorced. I went through my first divorce, and the way I processed that was I started to write again. And I
Okay.
loved it. And it was such a connection to myself. And I got so much out of it. But then again, I got remarried and I got promotions in my job. And that pull toward the what I call that sort of rational side of life, where that's what adults do. Adults don't have creative pursuits, took over. And so when I got divorced the second time, it was really hard for me.
Hmm.
And so my way to process all of that was to write. And
Yeah.
I started a blog, just threw it up out there. And a friend of mine who was reading it gave me a book called Why We Write About Ourselves.
Hmm.
And there was a lady in there, Kelly Corrigan, who was an editor for Medium. And
Okay.
I didn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what Medium was. And I checked it out and realized that people could take essays that they'd written and just publish it. And so I said, okay, well, maybe I'll just do that. And I threw it out there. And then overwhelmingly, I had an audience and
Yeah.
quickly and
Wow.
amazing input and people that were saying, thank you so much for putting these words out there. I feel the same way. I didn't realize that I wasn't
Hmm.
alone. And I lean into that. And that became such a place for me to process what I was experiencing. And I did that for years and grew quite the following on Medium to where I realized that this pull toward this creative side of me was no longer something that I wanted to ignore. And so I kind of had that. I call that was the beginning of my midlife crisis. And I had the most epic and beautiful and glorious midlife crisis. I don't call it a midlife crisis. It was my midlife awakening. And that
Awesome.
was a huge part of it. It's like, I'm going to do this and this is going to be for me. And I'm going to stop with the narrative that tells me I can't do this. And
That's
then the
wonderful.
podcast grew from that. And I've this has been my full-time job since March of this year, and I have no intention of turning back.
That's wonderful. I love hearing stories like this. This is again, you probably kind of can feel this where you're hearing, where you're divulging a lot of your life and just kind of how that experience is felt and reverberated back to you in those kind of ways. And so for myself, it's just like it is a level of vulnerability and a level of like you don't know what to expect, especially when it comes to the internet. So for myself, I want to say kudos for being as vulnerable as you have, especially throughout the different periods of your life. And I know for someone who's also, writing this down and writing your thoughts, it can be kind of cathartic in a sense that you're, laying this all out and allowing your mind to just reset. And so again, it is hard for me enough to divulge a little bit of my life throughout this podcast because I never really wanted it to be about me. My focus when I started this was just one of those opportunities of like, well, I don't know what I have here. I'm very like new to it all. I very want to, my approach was like, I just want to help people. I just want,
Right.
I always felt like, these stories that I hear. And when I started I was screen printing and helping business owners, get t-shirts and things like that printed out. But I was hearing these stories and I was just kind of like, well, why aren't, there should be a collection of these. These are really great stories and businesses that should be collected somewhere. And so I just, took it upon myself to like grab the microphones, grab every piece of equipment that I could and do it myself. And just kind of like, again, it was really that focus was like, it's about them. It's like, I want to hear what they have to say. But again, as I've gotten further along and you start to, understand, it's like you give a little to get a little. I've started to
Right.
allow myself to open up and be more personal in my experience with the one-to-ones. And so I just want you to know how much, like, again, you've been through a lot and you've been through so many different experiences than I have. So it's just incredible that you've put them down somewhere and you have them to look upon and reflect upon, but allow others to do the same. So I say kudos to that, because it's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
It's not, but it is so worthwhile. Because the more that I do that, the more that I connect back into myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I am recognizing parts of me that have kind of been dormant or that I haven't given much attention to.
Yeah.
And the more I do that, the more I feel human, the more I feel in general. And allowing me to do that allows me to connect with other people that might be experiencing similar things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where I have gotten so much satisfaction from this journey,
Mm-hmm.
is that whenever somebody comes to me and says that I just said what they needed to hear,
Mm-hmm.
that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like I am doing something that not only benefits myself, but that it's reaching other people. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't expecting that. And there are times that I've been vulnerable and shared information, and I've had people on the interwebs who have come back to me, and man, they're not kind.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to like take a breath and say, okay, that's not reality. That person is
Mm-hmm.
speaking from a place of their own experience, and they have to deal with that. I'm not here
Yeah.
to stomach that.
Yeah.
That's not for me to absorb. But so much of what I am doing and what led to the two different Substack newsletters connected to me realizing that there's a community
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be built, because I felt like I was experiencing things that nobody was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
or that we hadn't acknowledged or given ourselves the ability to just speak freely about.
Yeah.
And that's a woman's middle-aged perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, just recently, my late in life ADHD diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
that it's important for me to have that community. And I want to create that space for anybody else who
Sure.
needs it, to bring them into that, to say, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
You're not alone. We're all going to figure this out together.
Absolutely. I find that so endearing, because again, it's like it's what we start, or it's what it turned into essentially, where I just was like, I want to help people, and then it turned into, well, now we have a couple of people that we've a group of these episodes, and people who want to build something, like they wanted to come back and they want to start something to help continue this podcast to live on. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm realizing, well, we're doing it. We're in the moment here. We're having them look at us as the people who will start it. So yeah, it was really a like realization click, where it's like, oh man, like, yeah, this is something. So the fact that now our mission is really about the hearing those stories and allowing them to become a part of this group and part of this community that we're sharing here. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun for me, because it's affected not only me, but my entire family, and my life in general just is just filled with these beautiful individuals and businesses and groups and nonprofits that just really want to share their stories and share who they are to the community.
That's so wonderful. What great work you're doing. It's
Thank you
amazing.
very much. So let's kind of get into, I wanted, again, I brought this opportunity to share your words, the story of your words, and just how they've kind of built your life in a sense, and just kind of also want to kind of split the two things, where you're one part writer and one part podcast. I would love to understand how you approach kind of that I guess that hop and leap over into the physical aspect of like writing versus speaking.
Yeah, they're very different things. And when I launched the podcast, I had folks that had encouraged me to do that. I'd actually been a guest on someone's podcast, and they said,
Mhm.
I don't understand why you're not doing this yourself, because you have great stories and you're a great storyteller. And I suffer from massive imposter syndrome. And so it is hard for me to just say, oh, yes, I do. I'll go ahead and do that. So I sat on that for quite some time. And then I said, well, why not? Why would I not do that? And
Yeah.
like you, I recognize that there are people that had amazing stories that I wanted to further discussions and open up a way for there to be more communication about topics and for
Hmm.
people to grow in their understanding of the world by looking at things differently. And that's where the title of the podcast came from, which is I hadn't considered that.
Hmm.
And it started out originally as more conversation based, where I had folks that would come on the podcast and, like you, guests, and we
Hmm.
talk about certain topics. And it was trying to figure out the space in my life where the podcast lived was
Hmm.
difficult in the beginning because it's so different from writing.
Yeah.
Writing is a deeply personal and singular experience.
Hmm.
So, just to give you an example of what the writing process looks like for me,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
my daughter is home from college,
Hmm.
which is super fun. I'm an empty nester.
Oh,
She's in the next room binge watching Catfish
nice.
with the dog.
Nice.
I'm really glad that you can't actually see the rest of the room because Tornado Caroline has hit and it's up, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And we went to the airport yesterday to pick up her best friend who is home from college as well.
Yeah.
And I had this absolute moment of overwhelming joy driving with these girls in my car like I had, 4 years ago when they were,
Hmm.
freshmen and a sophomore
Yeah.
in high school. And just, I felt such emotion and joy that I told myself, I want to capture this
Yeah.
because it's not only just for me and honoring that and acknowledging it and celebrating it, but also just kind of putting it out there to be recognized,
Hmm.
especially if people are on the verge of being empty nesters. Perhaps they find it and they
Hmm.
get some comfort from that.
Absolutely.
And so I dropped Caroline off at her friend's house, and I came home and immediately opened up the the computer and I opened up a draft and I just started just typing away. And I will write fast and furious
Hmm.
and just get everything because I have to get it out of my head and quickly, or else
Yeah.
it's gone. It is
Yeah.
absolutely gone. And so I just go and I go and go, and then I just sit on it. And then I find a quiet space where there's some inspiration and I go back to it. And that's where I enjoy sort of crafting it and choosing the words and taking
Hmm.
more thoughtful time to tie them together in a way with transitions or more reflection or expand or
Yeah.
cut. And that sort of process is that's where I feel like the creation happens, where there's molding.
Yeah.
When you have a podcast, it is, I script the podcasts,
Hmm.
and now I hadn't considered that is me
Hmm.
alone, because I feel like when I started my creative journey, I bit off a little bit more than I could chew. I do that.
It happens.
I will, yeah, that's hello ADHD. And so putting it so that it's just myself for a shorter period of time, really kind of delving into a certain topic is great. And I find things that I'm
Hmm.
passionate about. One of the episodes of the podcast, I was reading a book by Betty Friedan, who she had done a study on the absence of images of people later in life in
Yeah.
magazines.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by this. So I recreated the study modern,
Yeah.
40 years after she had done it. Actually, I think it was like, yeah, it was 40 years after she had
Yeah.
done that. And that was my podcast episode
That's
to bring
awesome.
information and insight to people so that they're thinking about themselves and the world and noticing things in a different way. So
Yeah.
I think the podcast is, I still have to choose my words very carefully.
Yeah.
But being able to just speak is wonderful. My brain works faster than my mouth, which is
Yeah.
very difficult
Yep.
for me.
Same. Same.
Yeah, it's like
It's just
a
it's
live
on.
wire.
Well, then it's also for me, and you're different because you can. It's so this is faster than this, and then this is faster than this. So I
Yes,
just again, it's like it's I think for me, I have to take the extra step of like I'm gonna voice audio record myself if I'm doing like a blog, and then try to then like you go back as I can to structure and kind of create a more visual beauty to it.
Right. I will do the voice dictation for an essay
Hmm.
if I am in a space where I don't have the computer. I have done that in my car many times
Nice.
because I have to get the idea out.
Hmm.
And even if I'm just talking to myself about it,
Yeah.
then at least I clear it out of my head and I have a draft and I have something that I'm thinking about because
Train
I
of
just
thought.
I think all the time. Like it does not shut off here. And so
Yeah.
I will think about something in my head that I want to write about and then sometimes it's just gone.
Yeah.
And
Same
I
thing
if I
happens
don't
to
get it
me.
out.
I'm a creative like draw like a doodler, sketch and graphic artist, and so sometimes my wife will come up with a saying, or I'll come up with like, and I have to like jot it down because if I don't, or put it in my notes, so that if I go back and like, oh, I don't have time to like doodle it or kind of draw it up right now, but at least I'll have the train of thought of like, oh yeah, that was a good idea. Maybe I can create it again or from what I was
Mhm.
thinking about before. So yes, I've definitely been where you are. Is just like utilizing the notes app and utilizing that moment of like, I need to put it down somewhere so that I can go back to it.
Right, because there have been times when I have driven in the car and had a whole conversation with myself thinking, "I should have written all of that down, and now it's gone."
Yeah.
I keep a notepad in my purse, like, I have to have something by me
Nice.
all the time to get that
That-
idea and that thought out.
yeah.
I think in my Medium account, I have probably 300 unfinished drafts.
Drafts. Nice.
That I just and then some because sometimes I go back to it and I don't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
just a thought in
that
the moment,
motion or
and
something is you've either been cathartic enough to release those emotions and it's not the same as it was when you first drafted it, or it's something that again it's just like, well, this is you're still not in that moment. You're still not in the reflective emotional state where you can diverge or kind of dissolve, like explain it a little bit better. And so I think you were doing it just right, and I think you have a great appetite for this kind of writing and experience that you're putting out there. So I would like to go back to understanding kind of this emotional state of where you're being empathetic with your daughter and her friend, and just kind of like, has it always been a part of your life of this empathy in your family, or just kind of like, is that something just with you?
um, I I I am a very empathetic person.
Hmm.
I'm a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
I am very empathetic, almost sometimes bordering on hypervigilance. I'm learning the difference between hypervigilance and empathy and trying to understand where my life crosses over. Um,
Yeah.
but I also am learning a lot about how my brain works because of ADHD
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the sensitivity within me that increases because of that. I just feel things immensely.
Hmm.
And so I also have found that I am a very observant person. I am an introvert.
Hmm.
So I like to watch and I like to see what other people are doing. And I like
Yeah.
to be, I'm happy being in the back of the room, seeing what's going on around me without having to participate in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
because of that, I think I find ways to notice things and to pay attention to what's going on around me that I'm absorbing it.
Yeah.
I also firmly believe that the key to happiness is looking for and finding joy wherever we can.
Yeah.
And I think that as we grow older and as we become adults, we sort of lose that sense of wonder and joy about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to find that.
Good.
And so I look for everyday experiences and try to wrestle them to the ground and see what I can pull out of that. And the same thing happens with conversations. I believe, and part of
Yeah.
the genesis of the podcast, I think that everybody has a story to tell. It's on us to find the time and the space to let them share that with us.
Hmm.
So when you
Agreed.
meet someone and you're talking to someone, what is the story that they have? Because I think people are fascinating,
Me too.
absolutely fascinating.
Me too. I think
So yeah,
every
I just want to live within moments as much as I possibly can.
yeah. I I just again, I'm like, I'm on the same boat as you. There's this level of like the fascination of everyone has that like one story or something that they like it's ingrained in them. They have it perfectly set where they have the beginning, middle, and end. They have all of the kind of pinpoints of like an actual movie story that they can really rely on. They've told it hundreds and hundreds of times. For me, that's like it's like a book in a library. Like I want to have it so that I can also remember it, but also just capture it too. It's like a capturing a beautiful butterfly and allowing it to like be examined, and then you just let it go into the world. And so for me, every single time I do this, it's really I reflect upon it afterwards with my wife, or I just reflect upon it on myself. Something about just like taking it in and taking those stories and just allowing reflection upon them is just like really cool because for me, I get all the time like people ask that know me who know that I do the podcast, like my favorite thing that they ask is like, who's coming up next? Like who you got in next? And so I'm the librarian. I got this person coming up next because they're doing this and they're really cool because this story that they told me, you're going to love it. You know, that sort of thing. And so for me, it's just really beautiful that there are so many active individuals out there that want to do this and want to, again, I don't mind how many people want to just do the exact same thing as me. It's just collect stories or give their own stories, allow the, share their own, because again, it's important to have as many spaces, as many communities, as many opportunities to share that level of like you're not alone. Yeah, I have feel these exact same things. And so for me now, as I'm getting my son is turning 2. I'm done a couple of episodes that are fatherly, like podcasts that
Sure.
are father related. So I'm hoping to continue that forward and just again, it's like those moments where again, I'm like, this is my life now. Like this is something that I want to share. This is something that I think is important. Those episodes where also it's like a legacy piece for him. It's like, hey, look what dad did. Look dad was feeling.
Yes. Yes. When I first started writing after my first divorce, my daughter was only 2
Oh wow.
when her dad and I split up. And one of the things that I realized in going back to the writing and what I struggled with is coming out of that divorce is that I'd become so far away from the person that I knew that part
Hmm.
of why I wanted to write was so that my daughter had that legacy of when I am open and authentic and vulnerable,
Hmm.
my daughter has something that I can have for her that is a sort of a chronicle of her mother, where she knows her mother.
Yeah.
My daughter reads my blog. She has read me on Medium. She loves when I write about her. And she just I never ever wanted to write anything that she wasn't going to be proud of.
Yeah,
That has
absolutely.
been my litmus, and because, I think probably more so than she wants me to be proud of her, I want her to be proud of me,
Absolutely.
and that's been such a driving force is what I'm saying, telling the story of who I am in a way that allows other people to genuinely know who I am,
Hmm.
especially my child,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that has been, just critical for me, and it's interesting as you mention your podcast, sort of bringing on guests and talking about some fatherly issues. I have found that my content has followed my life and morphed sometimes into where am I going right now? And that's where,
Yeah.
a Substack that focuses on challenges of midlife. Because like I said, I had the most beautiful midlife awakening ever. And then, just recently, a lot of passion around the uh, ADHD neurodivergent space because
Yeah.
that was such a bombshell to me, and I am shocked at how many people are in that space with me.
Hmm.
It absolutely blows my mind that I'm looking at it. I was just in Bookman's yesterday, and the number of books about ADHD, particularly don't focus on children,
Hmm.
are minimal. very minimal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And about 3% of people suffer from ADHD. I would suffer wouldn't be some of us suffer, some of us are empowered by it.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to 1% of folks have OCD. But
Yeah,
there
okay. Yeah.
were twice as many books on the shelf about OCD than there were about ADHD, but
PhD.
3 times the people that are experiencing
Mm-hmm.
difficulties with that. So looking
Yeah.
at this going, we need to have this conversation. I need to have this conversation. As much as you are looking for connection regarding your role as a father.
Yeah.
And so it's beautiful when you can recognize that own need for you and then invite other people into that space to help
Mm-hmm.
you grow because you're acknowledging that and then allowing them to not only grow themselves, but to feel like they're giving something back as a father. So kudos to you. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate again all of the understanding that you are kind of giving dude and giving us that kind of level of like how you approach even doing kind of this is how you level out or kind of start to understand what you want to do in life. And then for us, it's about podcasting. But again, it's like that understanding of like, these are the things in my life that I'm focused on. I admit to needing help, even like as I'm trying to learn it. So let me allow, give me, I'm looking for guidance. Like I'm asking for help. This is my way of asking for help. Give me the guidance. So
Right.
that's really great. Thank you again. I just, I think we are on the same page as far as how we approach a lot of things with our podcasts and who we are as individuals too. So I'd love to kind of pivot towards your aha moment or just kind of like how this podcast world and the writing and now you're now starting to become a full-time this becoming a full-time thing. Where was that like where did it become that aha moment of like this has to become a full-time thing or do I need to make this a full-time thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a 22-year career
Hmm?
running large scale master plan communities.
Oh wow.
After I quit teaching, yeah, that is some hard work, let
Oh
me
yeah.
tell you, because you are like nobody likes you, right? Like nobody likes you. Like you're the HOA person, and like that's
Yeah.
a rough world to be in. And
Yeah.
as we've already established, I am a sensitive little flower,
Yeah.
and so
You're
that
taking
is
in all of those heated conversations.
oh my God. And as an empath, I'm just like, I would get in my car and just like wilt the second I got in my car. I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is hard living.
Hmm.
And when I got divorced 5 years ago and started writing, and I continued to do it sort of on the side, not necessarily as a business venture,
Hmm.
um, but something that gave me satisfaction, personal satisfaction.
Hmm.
And what I realized probably about a year and a half ago is that I could do this and manage this full time if I did some planning. And there
Yeah.
were a number of changes that I saw coming up in my life,
Hmm.
namely that my daughter was going to be going off to college
Hmm.
because as a single mom, so much of my life has been focused on her and
Yeah.
taking care of her. And you do what you need to do to make sure that there's stability. But then it got to the point where now it's just me.
Hmm.
And I think I had burned out so much in my life, and I was starting to really struggle with my work because as I started to become more connected to myself in my midlife, I realized that there was part of me that I loved that
Hmm.
was just shoved back into that corner and it didn't feel real anymore.
Hmm.
And I was depressed and I was anxious a lot because I didn't feel like I was fully being who I was. And so I realized, okay, housing market's great. Also, I sold my house. I downsized to I live in downtown Phoenix
Nice.
in a 775 square foot apartment. Just downsized everything. I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
have a cushion. I worked I took all of my money from writing and I paid off all of my debt so that I could leave a steady 9 to 5 job and pursue the creative side of it
Hmm.
so that I could live a life that finally I had allowed myself to have. And I think that One of my favorite quotes is from Mary Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
That is, tell me what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. And my aha
Mm.
moment was realizing that my one wild and precious life was not going to be spent sending people letters to tell them that their trash can was left out an extra day. Like, that is not in my life plan anymore. That's not who I want to be.
It's a good,
Right. So,
good choice. First off.
right. Right. What do I want to do? I want to connect with people. I want to sit in my feelings. And it's interesting now because when people ask me, what do I do?
It really is kind of that simple.
Oh my God, what do I do? I used to have an answer that was awful. And then people, like, you go to a dinner party and people are like, well, what do you do? And it's like, oh, I run a large scale HOA. And then they like scamper away super fast. They don't want to talk to you. They don't like you anymore. But when I tell people, yeah, I'm a writer and a podcaster, and then people say, what do you write about? And I'm like, I write about my feelings, Deborah. I write about all of my feelings. I have 897. I have to feel 42 every single day. So I have to write about at least 12 of them, or else I'm going to implode, Deborah. That's what I do. And
That's
then Deborah looks
beautiful.
at me like I either she hugs me or she scampers away as well. But it's sort of the culling of the herd. The people that are
Yeah.
my people are going to lean in and they're like, oh, I
Mm.
want to know all about this. And especially when I tell them, I write a lot about women's issues
Mhm.
and I speak a lot about things that are connected to our experiences as people in midlife who feel absolutely invisible. And I also now address issues that are surrounding neurodivergence that
Mhm.
people aren't talking about because I think there's a vast amount of us that are either late in life diagnosed or completely undiagnosed. And we have just been living our whole lives feeling awful.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
just don't want people to feel awful anymore. So it got to the point where I was so compelled by my creative pursuits that I
Mhm.
said, I'm going to find a way to make this happen because I can't live my life anymore not making this happen.
Yeah.
And so figuring it out becomes the necessity because um, if I didn't, I wasn't going to be living. And I'm
Absolutely.
not doing that.
Yeah.
And that's part of that midlife awakening of I don't have another 30 years left to squander not being who I am and doing what I want because I think that especially as women, we pride ourselves on being selfless
Mhm.
and putting other people first. And so we don't recognize who we are. And I realized that the time had come where I was going to allow myself to be who I was and to do what I want without having to explain that to anyone.
Beautiful.
And it's been fun.
Good. Good. I'm so happy for you, and that's really great. And really, truly inspiring for me too, as well as someone. Again, I'm nowhere near the kind of at the vulnerable point of like having to. I don't know. I think we love what we do here at the podcast, but it's not our main. It's not our main jobs. And for us, it was one of those moments too when the little guy was born or becoming. We knew about him. I had to make a choice of like, do I stay with where I'm working at, or do I try and find new opportunities so that I can work from home and be his full-time caretaker? Because
Mhm.
for both my wife and I, we chose, not to have someone else raise our son, especially being Native American. I wanted someone to teach him our culture and someone to be there to allow him to understand where he comes from. And so that is something that I was like, that's where I stand. That's kind of my line. And I was able to find a place where I can work a split shift and do that time with him and be his full-time caretaker. And I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world because those again, it's like the being the tangible and those moments of like, look, I chose this life. I want this because I know that I would rather be working those weird hours, but spending all that time, as much time to be with him, to share those moments of growth, share those moments of reading a book, having lunch together, going outside and understanding the different languages that you're allowed to speak and experience, and just give him that opportunity that I didn't really get as my own for my own childhood. So it's just, again, I really, really, that was something that's like, that's what I want for him. That's what I want. And that's the life I chose. And again, I love it. I wouldn't change anything right now because we
Good for
have a
you.
blast. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
So we're reaching the end here, and I always like to end lead our conversation in the end here to goals and opportunities or events that you have coming up in the future. But it's like, for you, I know that you're a constant moving target. So is there something that maybe it's just like for the holidays, or something that you're looking forward to for your writing, for the podcast?
That's a great question. And I've got a couple different things that I'm working on. One of the things that I'm doing right now is looking at taking my writing more external to just Medium and the two Substack newsletters that I
Mhm.
have. And
Yeah.
I'm working on pitching publications online or otherwise
Mhm.
where there is a space for the conversations that need to happen, particularly about women in midlife. I just
Mhm.
spoke to an editor today that has a website that's geared specifically
Nice.
toward midlife women, and looking at their content and sort of filling the gaps of what do women need to know? Because what I keep going back to is, how can I reach people that feel overwhelmed with where they are
Mhm.
or feel unseen? And so I want to continue doing the work that reaches those groups of people that either don't have resources or
Mhm.
don't have the folks around them to say, hey, are you paying attention? Because
Mhm.
especially women in midlife have a tendency to feel invisible. There's a
Mhm.
certain thing that happens to us around 45 where the world seems to tell us that we no longer have any purpose or business in the world. We
Mhm.
can't have kids anymore because we're too old, or we have kids like me that have left the the house, and
Yeah.
so our role as a mother is done, or it never started, or we're divorced
Mhm.
and we're no longer wives, and our we're questioning our careers and everything, and it's a lot to sit with. So I want to continue to try and get some of that information out to reach a wider audience by
Yeah.
connecting with more publications. With the work that I'm doing with sort of this late in life ADHD diagnosis, that's where I'm really feeling compelled to do work in that arena right now,
Yeah.
because I started talking about it on social media on an unlikely platform, which was TikTok,
Mhm.
which is, just odd to be 48 years old and on TikTok to begin with. But what I realized is there is a mass of
Mhm.
women who are after 40, either not realizing that they may have this issue, or they've
Mhm.
just recently been diagnosed. And there's an entire story there. There
Yeah.
are reasons why, there are societal issues. There is so much that is connected to the female experience of living your entire life with a brain disorder and not realizing it, and then mm, feeling compelled to do work to help women in that place.
Yeah.
I joke around that my life right now is just a continual process of toddler proofing my life, except for I'm the toddler. I'm the toddler. So whether it's looking around my life and getting rid of everything that is a distraction, me trying to understand my brain and just going through this and
Mhm.
realizing that as I do it, I'm just writing it down and putting, coaching modules together to say, okay, let's all toddler proof our
Mhm.
own spaces, and creating the tools that I need, because a lot of them just don't exist.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's nothing out there that's like, hey, middle-aged woman who has been dealing with this for 40 years, let's let's tell you how to deal with the crushing self-esteem that you have had because you just thought you were horrible at being an adult. You're not
Mhm.
horrible at being an adult. You have a brain
This
disorder.
disorder. Yeah. Well,
Right. So trying to reach that demographic, so that I hate the idea of people feeling alone. I can't stomach it.
Wonderful. I mean, it's really great that you have taken this opportunity to, again, plunge yourself into this, world of like, I am needed for help and I want to also help at the same time. So it's like, again, it's like you're a fantastic individual, and I have no question that what you're going to do with the opportunities given and taking, and just again, you're going to make a big difference in this world, in what you've created and what you're going to do with what you're curious about too, as well. So I have nothing but kudos and applause for you and everyone that you experienced and touched in your world. So again, I just am very impressed by who you are and what you've created. And again, anytime you want to come back, please come back. Let us know what's going on.
Anytime.
So
this has been a joy.
Thank you very much. If you will do me the honor, if you will let everyone know where they can find you online and where they all the website stuff. And then if you have any events coming up in the future that you're going to be a part of that you want to just share out there too, go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Sure. So everything is centered on my website. My website is vanessatorre.com. And there you can find my writing, and that connects to both of my Substack newsletters. So my Substack for Meeting in the Middle is vanessatorre.substack.com. And then Late to My Own Party is obviously latetomyownparty.substack.com. But all of those, there's links on my website there. And so people can also click and get to the podcast over there. There's links to all of the social media. And that's basically where I house everything, sort of centrally located right there on my website, vanessatorre.com.
Nice. All right. Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we go, we do have our little bit at the end here. You can hear every episode of our podcast at findingarizonapodcast.com. All the social media is under Finding Arizona Podcast, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Let us know who you wanted next, and we'll try and get that to happen. And last but not least, we always say kisses, hugs, and belly rubs to our four-legged friends, and we will always see you on the next one. Good night. Goodbye, y'all.